Welcome back to another GTN Coach's Corner, where we answer all your training-related questions. In this week's show, triathlon after marathon build-up, choosing between missed sleep and doing that training session, learning to absorb carbs whilst training and racing, training around a holiday, and a very, very high heart rate. Let's get straight to those questions. First one is from Palms89. He says, GTN Coach's Corner. I love the show and all the content. It's been a long-term goal of mine to complete an Olympic distance try and also run a marathon. I am a competent runner, clocking 30 kilometers a week and cycling 20 kilometers to and from work every day. However, I swim 2 kilometers breaststroke, but barely 100 meters front crawl. I've signed up for the Sydney Marathon in September and contemplating and taking an Olympic try at the end of November. I'm focusing on my running for the marathon at the moment, but conscious the try is not far behind. Am I being overly ambitious trying to tick these off in succession? Is it feasible for me to build up my swim endurance and complete the trial whilst also maintaining fitness on the other sports, or should I just revert to breaststroke during the swim? Okay, well, yes, you should absolutely do both. There's more than enough time there, and in worst case scenario, you can actually just revert to breaststroke and get through the swim and then enjoy the bike and run for that triathlon. Not being able to do the whole distance freestyle shouldn't be a reason why you can't do the race. You can just do 200 meters breaststroke and then 200 meters front crawl, etc. the whole way through if you like. You should definitely enter both. You can do them. Biking to work and your run fitness will definitely see you through the triathlon, and I think you'll probably enjoy it. For the swim, I would say you need to build that confidence up, and it's going to take you some time to get comfortable swimming that distance, and being able to swim freestyle for longer than 100 meters is going to take some work. I would do one longer swim a week where you really work on that freestyle technique and try to improve it and get fitter, and then another swim where it's a bit shorter. You don't have to be fresh for the second one. You can just do it after a run or something, but try to just work on your stroke and just try and dial that in, because that will make a very big difference. If you can breathe well and you can keep your freestyle stroke, suddenly you'll be able to swim further and further, and by November, you may very well be swimming the whole distance freestyle. So good luck with that. Good luck with your marathon first, but then good luck with getting ready for that triathlon. I'm pretty sure you can do both. Okay, next question is from Dakila Moti, and they say, GTN Coach's Corner. I barely had enough sleep yesterday because of life/work. A key session workout is supposed to be scheduled for today. My question is, do I push through the key workout even with a lack of sleep, or forgo that for more rest and recovery? Should I still do at least something with low intensity instead? Obviously, she didn't post this yesterday, so I guess the question's already gone, but it is a relevant question for a lot of people. Sometimes life gets in the way. Sometimes you just have a really bad night's sleep for whatever reason. It may be something personal. It may be work-related, whatever. You have a really bad night's sleep, but then the next morning you're supposed to be doing a very key session, a very big, hard session, and you can't decide whether you should just take an extra hour or two of sleep, or whether you should get that session done anyway. This really depends. It depends on your overall picture. You need to take a step back and see what your whole picture of the week looks like. If following that hard session, you then have a few days of easier training and you are going to be able to sleep well the following night, you don't have even more work to catch up on, and the following night after that, more work. If you're going to have 3 or 4 good nights of sleep and your program allows you for some recovery from that hard session, I would say go ahead and push through that session. You will be a bit tired. You may not hit the numbers that you might ordinarily get, but you will get a lot of benefit from doing that session. So I'd say go ahead and push through and get it done. You will feel a lot better for having done. However, if that hard session is part of a very stringent regimen where you don't have a lot of time, you have the absolute minimum amount of time between that session and the next session, you also are not sure you're going to get a very good night's sleep the following night or the night after that, then you still have work deadlines and lots of extra stuff going on in your life, then I would say that you actually are probably better off cutting that session right back. There is no point in digging yourself into a massive hole to get one particular session done. No one particular session is going to make the difference on race day. It's the whole picture. That one particular session is worth doing if it is your one big one for the week and you can recover well for it afterwards. If it is just going to dig you into a hole and for the rest of the week with all your other training and life stresses, you're just going to be a wreck of yourself, then it's not worth doing that, or you should take it right back and just skip that session. You will lose less in the long run than forcing yourself through that session and then being exhausted for a week or more afterwards. I hope that answers your question. Next question is from Deban Strass, and they say, can you also train efficient carb intake by depriving yourself of carbs during training? In other words, is this a similar process such as pushing your body physically to the limit with the goal that it recovers to a better state? I see what you mean there, that if you work really hard to break your body down, then it comes back and it's even fitter, and that is how fitness building works. That is not how carb intake works. If you want to train your body to absorb carbs, you need to give it carbs to absorb. You need to challenge its ability to absorb carbs, not challenge its ability to train without any. It's not going to then ravenously eat any carbs that you give it because you starved it for a few sessions. The opposite, in fact. What it will do, you do get such a thing as fasted training, which is training your fat adaptation. And that is essentially training without any carbs in your gut so that your body learns to mobilize and utilize your fat reserves for energy. However, that itself is not necessarily performance enhancing, because being good at absorbing carbs will still be faster at provision of energy than purely only fat mobilization, no matter how good at that you do get. So, I would say that if you do want to, what you should do is maybe do some fasted sessions where you do peak that fat mobilization and teach your body to mobilize those fat reserves. But your main goal should be to train your gut to absorb carbs. And the way you do that is by taking carbs in during training while you're exercising. And the best triathletes in the world will actually be able to increase their carb intake all the way up to almost 400 calories an hour they can take out, even at high intensities, at top of zone 3, bottom of zone 4, they can still be taking in up to 400 calories an hour. And that's what you want to train towards. But that is obviously the top end of the spectrum. Don't start there. Don't start by guzzling down 4 gels every hour while you're out there training, because that will be a bit too much and a bit too hard on your stomach. Rather start with about 200 calories an hour and then build up from there as your body learns and adapts to absorb that while you're racing and while you're training. And then as you get better at it, you can take a little bit more until you get to that point where you know you've taken too much, and you will know. Train your body's ability to absorb fuel. And you're not going to train that by not giving it fuel. The opposite. Okay, we don't have a name here. Unit 1337 says, GTN Coach's Corner, I'm going on holiday for a few weeks and I'm going to have to stop training for a few days until I get back. Would it be best to overload my training in the few days before I leave so I need and enjoy the lack of training while I'm on holiday? Or should I just continue at the planned intensity and skip the sessions that I'm going to miss? Okay, this is a common trap that people fall into, cramming your training because you're going to have a break from training. It's not a very good idea for a number of reasons. I can see how it's tempting because you know you're going to have 3, 4, 5 days off of training. Firstly, you want to mentally be able to wrap your head around that break in training, and therefore if you really need to recover at that point, you're more easily able to do that. And secondly, if you're going to have 5 days to recover, you may as well do a really ridiculously hard training session, or a few really ridiculous hard training sessions, and then spend that 5 days recovering. However, there is a lot of risk attached to that strategy. Your body is not just suddenly able to absorb whatever you throw at it. The reason that we do a gradual build up, and the reason that this week's session only adds a small amount on last week's session, is because your body needs time to adapt to that. And if you suddenly throw an extra load of training onto it, yes, you may just go into that holiday really tired and really make the most of that holiday, but you may also go into that holiday carrying a niggle or an injury, a sore Achilles or a sore knee or a sore hip. And that may take longer than the 3, 4, or 5 day holiday that you have to recover. And you may find that you can't train when you come back. And that is not necessarily going to happen, but the risk of that happening makes it not worth cramming that training. Yes, if you are pretty fit, you can do one slightly harder session than you would normally do, end that training block on a really solid session, maybe add a couple, 2, 3, 4 more reps than you would normally do, maybe push the distance up by a little bit on your long ride or long run, but don't cram your training and don't put yourself into that risky zone where you are exhausted and you're still pushing on just to get one more session in so that you can collapse on the beach for 5 days. That is a risky strategy, and it is not worth the risk of injury to do that. Rather keep it consistent right up until your holiday, and then still enjoy your holiday. And when you come back, you can really work work hard because you'll be fresh and recovered. Okay, Tice Hatton says, hi, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Hi, GTN team. I'm a 16-year-old triathlete who is training for a self-run half Ironman in October because I'm too young for Ironman events. I've been struggling to keep my heart rate down over a year. My max heart rate is 213-ish. Recently, I did a 16K or 70-minute training run, pushing but not all out, and averaged a whopping 193 beats per minute. This is not an isolated case, and I had the same issue on the bike. To get to my so-called zone 2 heart rate, I have to keep my heart rate around 160 to 65 beats per minute. Yet I'm able to hold a full conversation and a heart rate of an excess of 180 beats per minute. My question is, should I be worried that my base isn't strong enough, or just worried in general? And then Olivia Hool commented on that and said, I'm also 16 years old and I have the same problem with similar data, and I'm asking myself the same question. Okay, firstly, on the heart rate thing itself. A high heart rate does not mean you're unfit. A high heart rate, especially a high max heart rate, means that you have a high heart rate. Most of that is genetic. It's not a lack of fitness, particularly your max heart rate. What your max heart rate is defined by your genetics. You got it from your parents, basically. And yes, it can change over time with lots of endurance training. You can increase the stroke volume of your heart and maybe never be able to get your heart rate as high as you used to be able to. But your max heart rate is predetermined and it is yours alone, and it's not worth comparing it to anyone else. So just because you have a high heart rate doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your fitness or your build. What does affect your fitness, or what is telling on your fitness, is what effort you can put out at that heart rate. And what you want to see is that you, at a specific heart rate, say 180, where you are now able to have a conversation. Later on, you'll be able to run faster and still have a conversation. And that's what you want to see. You want to see your pace per heart rate improving. Your max heart rate is not really relevant. Firstly, make sure those zones are accurate. So do a threshold test or a max heart rate test and make sure that the zones you're working on are accurate for you. Don't compare them to anyone else. A note on this though, and we are going to say this because there are lots of people watching and listening. If your heart rate is erratic, if you're seeing spikes in some sessions where it is going really high, higher than you thought it might or higher than it usually does, first obviously check that it's not your heart rate monitor. But if you are worried about it, go and get it checked out. There are various reasons why you may have a spiking or erratic heart rate, and you should probably go to your medical practitioner, your doctor, and have that checked out. They can run a stress ECG quite easily, and they'll be able to isolate anything that might be going on in your heart, like an arrhythmia or something like that. If there is something like that, or you're worried, definitely go and see a medical professional. Don't mess around with your heart. But a high heart rate in itself, especially if it's consistently high in all your sessions and you know you've got a high max heart rate, is not a problem in and of itself. And then I'm going to say one more thing on this post, because there are two 16-year-olds here who seem to be in a similar boat. The cutoffs for Ironman age are there for a reason. It is not a very good idea to be doing Ironman distances or even half Ironman distances at the age of 16. I realize that it is tempting and that going further and pushing harder is definitely in your genetic makeup or in your motivation, and you really want to go further and further and push yourself more and more. But I would strongly suggest that you push yourself by trying to get your sprint and Olympic triathlon times lower and lower while you're in your teens. You can save your long distance, your half Ironman and Ironman for your 20s, and then you can try and improve those times. Then don't just try and go further is not always better, especially when you're in your teens. Try and work on those your form and try and work on your speed while you're younger, and that will carry you through to much better PBs later on in your 20s when you do step up to the half Ironman distance. Just a word of warning or a word of caution there for you. I hope you guys have enjoyed the questions today. If you have your own questions, in the comment section down below this video or any of our videos, use the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. And next week, we could be answering your questions on your training related questions. So get those questions in. Thanks for watching. See you again next week.